There's good reason for media to be terrified about YouTube and social media accounts and why they spend time demonizing YouTubers as being someone you can't trust and promoting hate speech when we give an alternate opinion. But if you think mainstream media isn't lying to you, you have another thing coming. The latest documentary on Luigi Mangione helps accentuate the differences between mainstream media and social media and why Americans are starting to move away from mainstream media because they realize it's a choice of, do you trust the devil you know or the devil you don't know? Now, it's been a while since I've covered a Luigi Mangione story, and I just saw another documentary come out from Real Stories, which is a YouTube channel that does documentaries. Ironically enough, this whole episode is a little bit featured on the whole YouTube versus CNN and Fox News and all the mainstream media sources. I have a lot of people who say, for example, that YouTubers like true crime channels like mine are trying to profit off of death and murder and victims, and therefore there's something despicable about the way that we handle the news. However, Americans are shifting away from mainstream media news because they're realizing that the news is paid for by their corporate sponsors. And therefore, when the news tells you a story about something in the news, it is shaped in a certain way to protect their corporate interest and their corporate sponsors and their advertisers. So if you think mainstream media isn't biased in their opinion, you have another thing coming. And I want to accentuate, using the latest documentary on Luigi Mangione, how the issue of healthcare in America is being shaped by those in the media who are largely funded by pharmaceutical companies and the healthcare industry versus YouTubers who don't have a stake in the game but are being demonized as hate speech, haters, and glorifying violence and death because we don't support the corporate agenda. Now, the latest documentary that I saw is from a group called Real Stories. It's a UK-based documentary service on YouTube. It's been around since I think about 2015. They do a lot of long form videos. I think about 3 documentaries a week. It's well produced, well scripted, high quality, and it's a YouTube channel that is doing very well at presenting the news. And I would say that there are more people tuning into those kind of things, over 1 million subscribers, for example, on Real Stories, who will watch that as a source of news over CNN and Fox. What is shifting in America? Now, on the latest documentary about Luigi Mangione, I will say that, like mainstream media, Real Stories in their documentary about Luigi Mangione has already chosen a side before they even begin. And you can argue that I do the same thing. But the title, for example, of their latest documentary is Luigi Mangione's Murder of United Healthcare CEO, Act of Justice or Terror. That's the title of the episode. So again, Luigi Mangione's Murder of United Healthcare CEO, Act of Justice or Terror. Right in the title off the bat, there's no presumption of innocence. At Devil's Advocates, you know that I presume innocence until proven guilty in a court of law. Luigi Mangione has not had his first day on trial, and yet we're already told by the title alone, and this is the same thing all mainstream media does, even YouTubers, is that Luigi Mangione is the killer of Brian Thompson. We don't know that yet. Allegedly, he's the killer. That's what you're supposed to say when you have a presumption of innocence, that he's allegedly the shooter of Brian Thompson. Whether or not that turns out to be true or not is something that needs to be fought over in a court of law. But this documentary starts out with a typical mainstream media tactic, which is to tell you what the end result is already. Luigi Mangione did kill Brian Thompson, end of story. And in fact, over and over again in this documentary, as all documentaries, they will tell you about Luigi Mangione's manifesto. He wrote a manifesto. He told you exactly why he killed Brian Thompson. Manifesto, manifesto, manifesto. For God's sake, first of all, the first thing we need to do when we examine these documentaries is get off this fucking manifesto idea. A manifesto is written for the public to show what your ideals are, the reason why you committed the crime. The documents that everyone is referring to in media as Luigi Mangione's manifesto wasn't designed for the public. It was a spiral notebook with personal notes and thoughts about his opinions. It was also, maybe you might say, maybe if the letter and the spiral notebook do belong to Luigi Mangione, it was a letter written to the feds, not to the public. It wasn't meant to be disseminated to the public. It did not become public until the government itself and the media published the writings of Luigi Mangione and put it out into the public atmosphere. That's when it became a manifesto, because a manifesto is designed to be given to the public. Luigi Mangione, even if he wrote the letter that they say he wrote to the feds or the spiral notebook, didn't intend for it to go to the public. It was an inside notebook, a personal diary, and the letter to the feds was addressed just to the feds, not to the American public. So again, this idea of saying, one, Luigi Mangione already is the killer before he said his first day in court, and then telling you over and over again that his manifesto tells you so. He didn't have a freaking manifesto. It was personal writings and a letter to the Fed. And that's if Luigi Mangione is the one who actually wrote those things. Again, while many people believe that's the case, the arrest in Altoona, Pennsylvania was illegal. And his lawyers are saying that both in Pennsylvania and in New York. Both Thomas Dickey and Karen Dignifilo have stated that that arrest in Altoona, Pennsylvania was illegal. So the so-called confession letter to the feds and spiral notebook may never even be allowed into a court of law. And yet they will tell America over and over again, Luigi Mangione had a manifesto and told you exactly why he killed Brian Thompson. This is a circular logic. Put it out there in the narrative first, tell everybody it's a manifesto, and now everybody is asking the question, why did he do it? We should be asking, did he even do it? We didn't start that. But I want to go into a little bit of the details of this documentary, because one of the things that I thought was done cleverly in this documentary is, while they did tell you that Luigi Mangione killed Brian Thompson and that he wrote a manifesto about it, which both of those things shouldn't be stated up front. We don't know, allegedly, well, we don't know that he killed Brian Thompson. That's something to be determined by the facts. And second of all, the manifesto isn't a manifesto. But what they did do very cleverly is they explained how Americans are divided on how to feel about Luigi Mangione. And that's the key point of this message. Now, what they did super cleverly is they don't want to say, as everyone has to be afraid to do, that they don't want to say that there's somehow some kind of justification for killing the CEO of United Healthcare, that there was something good about that. They said no innocent person deserves to be murdered. However, they even counterpointed in the same documentary that policies that kill thousands of innocent people by denying claims also is not right. So at the end of the day, which is the worst evil? Now, if you're mainstream media, you are every other commercial on your channel is the pharmaceutical commercial. It's the medical industry. Are you going to report on the death of a United Healthcare CEO in the pharmaceutical, tied to pharmaceutical companies through the practices of the medical industry? Are you going to trust mainstream media to not slant the narrative, to paint pharmaceutical companies and the medical industry in a positive light? And yet they will demonize YouTubers and social media who criticize the pharmaceutical companies and the medical industry, who are paying for advertisement on mainstream media. Are you seeing the problem? So some of you will say, for example, as to me, that if I cover a story like Luigi Mangione, that I'm profiting off the murder of Brian Thompson. Regardless of how you view it, both sides may be perceived as presenting a slant. Mainstream media is trying to make money for their shareholders and their advertisers, who often are in the medical industry and in pharmaceutical industry. Do you really trust them to tell you the truth about it? And so at the end of the day, this whole documentary was an expose about the difference between mainstream media and YouTubers and where that's all going. They talked about how YouTubers and social media have begun to celebrate Luigi Mangione. And again, there was an indication by mainstream media that means that YouTubers and social media are practicing hate speech and that we should shut that down. By the same token, again, mainstream media is slanted to put things in a positive spin for the healthcare industry. There was talk in this documentary about how at the end of the day, the shooting of Brian Thompson may have positive benefits on society. For example, it is possible that we have reached a tipping point in America, that this may lead to broader changes in the healthcare industry, that it may force the medical industry to make changes because public perception is getting to the point where they're so angry they're literally willing to kill someone to stop the abuse of a corporate system where we have profits over people. And we talk about other countries and how the United States has the highest cost of healthcare anywhere in the world, but does not have greater life expectancy than other places. Why is it if we have the most expensive healthcare system, do we not have better quality of life than others? Something's wrong with that equation. And And so at the end of the day, the documentary was good for one thing and one thing only. It did accentuate in a very clever and careful way that maybe perhaps somehow the death of Brian Thompson, while tragic, and while the death of an innocent man just doing his job, they actually hinted at, is it ethical for someone to do their job if it comes at the cost of human lives that are being lost because AI programs are automatically denying people's health care? And so at the end of the day, on this little short rant I wanted to share today, Luigi Mangione is at the top of my mind again, but I'm accentuating again the differences between mainstream media and social media and how we are trying to polarize America, how mainstream media is trying to demonize YouTubers for bringing up the subjects that they won't bring up, which is how bad healthcare is broken in America, and how they will use steps to demonize Luigi Mangione, calling him a murderer of an innocent man and father of two over and over again, and how his manifesto showed that he was a horribly violent man willing to commit murder of an innocent man. Where other people like us, YouTubers, have to be out there and counter correct mainstream media to say, by the way, you're missing the bigger picture. What is wrong in our society that murder of a healthcare CEO became an option? And isn't it ironic that a documentary like this will tell you that, you know, perhaps the death of Brian Thompson will lead to social change. Perhaps it is a tipping point in America where things are going to change. Luigi Mangione's case is going to be enormous. This case, when it goes to trial, may actually put the United States healthcare system on trial in a fundamental and roundabout way. And that's going to be the question. Will any judge allow an argument to be made in the court system that if Luigi Mangione did shoot Brian Thompson, was it an act of self-defense? Did Luigi Mangione save lives by shooting a man whose policies were put in place to make profits over people, to make his shareholders money? And they talked about, by the way, how Brian Thompson made money, profited off of United Healthcare's policy of denying claims, and how he cashed in over $15 million of stock before it became publicly announced that they were under investigation by the Department of Justice for things like antitrust and other violations. And that basically there was multiple investigations into United Healthcare's predatory practices, which were costing lives. And then they just sold out and made a bunch of money on the way out. Somebody gets pissed enough to go out and shoot Brian Thompson, perhaps for things like that. Then the question at the end of the day is, who is evil? So I just wanted to share with you my thoughts on the latest documentary. It feels a little fragmented today, so I feel bad about that. It's a little fragmented, like there was no focused thing. The purpose of this video was to both highlight the latest documentary about Luigi Mangione, where once again Luigi Mangione is presumed guilty before he has his first day in court. That is something I rail against at the Devil's Advocates. It's also, though, to address that bigger issue, which is those who say that YouTubers can't be trusted, but mainstream media can, when in fact this documentary does well at highlighting how corporate interests shape how the news is portrayed to you in the first place. So, do you trust the devil you know or the devil you don't know? You pick your choice.